Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It, presented to you by Fireside. I'm your host, Terry Woolman, and my guest today is Luthier Roger Sadowsky. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance, and don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us in our live audience today, we'll be inviting questions and comments during the second half of our show. So make it count and simply request an invite to speak. And my moderator, Dr. Lisa, will bring you on stage to join the conversation. Let me tell you about my guest. Roger Sadowsky is one of the most highly respected instrument makers in the world. His basses and guitars are played by many of the world's greatest artists, including Jim Hall, John Abercrombie, Pat Metheny, Lee Ritenour, Chuck Loeb, Marcus Miller, Will Lee, Rickey Minor, Michael Rhodes, Verdine White, and Jason Newsted. Roger grew up in New York City in the 1950s and began playing guitar in the spring of his junior year in college. While working his way through a PhD program in Psychobiology at Rutgers University, he became friends with a group of professional folk musicians and soon became obsessed with the guitar. A year later, he left his PhD goals behind. After over 4 decades of producing some of the world's most coveted instruments, Roger's greatest joy continues to be witnessing the complete satisfaction a customer receives when making music with a Sadowsky instrument. Roger Sadowsky, welcome to Making It. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you, Terry. Pleasure to be here.
So, and also Dr. Lisa, hi, welcome to the show. Are you with us?
Yes, I was furiously typing about Roger. So I'm going to go back to that, but I'm glad to be here. So many connections with where he's lived, so I'm going to let you get started.
Yes, and by the way, you both, well, actually, you finished your PhD, Lisa. Roger's story is a little bit different, but you're both artists and creators who also are in academia, so that you can join the conversation later on as well. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa.
So, Roger, I want to start this conversation with one of the things that we said in the intro, which is that about your joy coming from the satisfaction of seeing that the people that use your instruments to make music are happy and they're fulfilled. And so I want to begin our conversation by talking about the importance you place on one-on-one relationships with artists, because it's such a big part of the mission statement of how you run your business and your art.
Well, I had an epiphany back in 1982 that as much as I love the process of making a guitar or a bass, that when I'm done, that instrument can't love me back. And I realized that all of the satisfaction for me as a human being was dealing with the person who was playing that instrument and my contribution to them via my instruments. And so that's when I got really clear that I really wanted to sell direct to players as much as possible and have a one-on-one relationship with them. And right now, at this point in my career, I mean, I have gone through periods where I've sold some instruments to dealers, but I'm not doing that at all now. Everything's direct. We downsized our business as a result of COVID. So I'm actually back where I used to be many years ago, where I answer the phones and I do all the emails and I take all the orders. And I really enjoy that relationship with my clients.
Yeah, one of the many things that's unique about you is that you are accessible, that you make the time to answer questions and deal directly with people, even if they're not already your customers. They're potential customers, but they're also, anybody who calls you is already going to be a fan of your work.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much true. People who come to me pretty much know what I'm doing and what my instruments are about. But, again, it's the whole, you talk a lot about integrity and that's been a very big part of my being as well for the last 45 years. My word is all I've got. Okay. I mean, that's all I got. When back in the early days when I was doing repair work, if I told you your guitar was going to be ready to pick up on Friday, it was going to be ready to pick up Friday. If I told you that it was going to cost $130, I was charging you $130.
Right.
So I realized that, again, that keeping my word was fundamental to who I am as a person. And so between that and my desire to connect, one person to another, I mean, that's really, it's about connecting.
Right.
That's really what's driven me my whole 40 plus years.
I imagine that some of those qualities that you're talking about, you already had instilled in you before, like when you were younger, when even you were in school getting your master's and working on your PhD. You don't automatically just do a flip and have integrity. Or
I'm old enough that in the 70s I did some human potential growth programs like the training and the forum. And that really, and also I got heavily I became a Japanophile, and, like the Way of the Samurai became something that spoke to me. So all of that stuff really had formed me pretty well by the early 80s.
Right. That makes sense. That was a beautiful part of growing up in that period. Did you ever practice martial arts? Was that also part of your?
I never did. And my new thing right now is Stoic philosophy. I'm really digging that a lot.
What exactly is Stoic philosophy?
Well, it was started by the Greeks, and it was promoted heavily by some of the Romans, like Marcus Aurelius. And I realized that a lot of what I got out of the S training and these other workshops really come directly from there. Mm-hmm. And in a nutshell, you can't control anything in your life other than how you react to it, your mind. That's all you really have any control over, and your mind controls your emotions. And so it's a lot of being in the moment. And that's one of the things I like about the work is it keeps me in the moment. And I find that it's a very enlightening place to be.
Yeah. And also the fact that you're a musician as well. I mean, you've been playing guitar since college.
Right.
I know you think you started a little bit late, but it's been an integral part of your life for a long time, and that involves
I took piano for 4 years as a kid until my teacher told me she was wasting her money on me. I played baritone, horn, and tuba in junior high school and high school, and I filled in college my freshman year on bass drum and Chinese gong.
So an eclectic musical background.
Yes.
Look, I was going to wait on this, but since we're talking about this when you were younger, let's talk about your family a little bit in early life. I know that your dad listened to Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole, and your mom loved listening to Broadway musicals. And so it seems like, were they forcing you to take piano lessons or encouraging you?
No. They didn't force me to do any of that stuff. there was no pressure really to practice every day, and, but again, I mean, you got to want to do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you understand that you understand you understand discipline because you practice discipline in your craftsmanship and as well. So it carries, you understand the idea of being focused.
Yeah, and even in my early days with my own shop, I mean, I was working 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day like clockwork. I never put a gone fishing sign on the door. And took, I can literally tell you 2 times that I played hooky from work back in the day is I took off a half a day to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I took off a half a day to see Lawrence of Arabia on the big screen.
Mm-hmm. Epic movies, right?
I mean, I just worked all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, you still do. I mean, you were telling me that you still work 6 days a week.
I do, and often a couple hours on the computer after dinner.
And is it appropriate for me to say that you're over 60? That
I'm 72 now.
You're 72. So, yeah. And you're still working 6 days a week. I imagine partially because it's required because you are running a business, but also you still are extremely passionate about what you do.
Without a doubt. There's no question about it. I mean, I can't even wrap my brain around retiring.
Right.
I mean, I want to work and drop dead at my workbench one day.
Yeah. Hopefully that's a long time from now, but that's a good goal.
Yeah,
same here. So I want to, there's something I think that's really, it's interesting to me about you, and I'm curious how you feel about this. I know that you began playing guitar in the spring of your junior year in college, and you were learning to fingerpick, like listening to Gordon Lightfoot and Paul Simon and other artists like that. Here's my question for you. Do you ever take a moment to think about how some of the world's greatest musicians who have influenced you now play the instruments that you've built by hand?
Wow, that's an interesting question, Terry. And I really don't think I have. I mean, again, my initial passion was acoustic guitars, and I haven't been able to make my career in acoustic guitars for a variety of reasons we can talk about. So those types of guys have not typically been my clientele. I'd say the closest to that, it was my relationship with Paul Simon. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming to New York in 1979 before I moved here, and I was out with Andy Schwartz, who's president of the 802 Musicians Union in New York these days, and we're sitting in a Japanese restaurant on the Upper West Side, and Paul and his brother Eddie walk in and sit at the table right next to me, and I kept my cool, but what I'm thinking in my head is one day I want to work on his guitars. And 3 years later, I got called in by Phil Ramone when they were rehearsing for the 82 Central Park concert, I think, Simon and Garfunkel. And that was pretty amazing. And I think the other super amazing memory was at the end of the Graceland tour. I had about 8 instruments on stage during the Graceland tour, between Paul, the 2 South African guitarists, and the bass player. I had like 8 instruments on stage. And the end of the tour, Paul did a concert at Madison Square Garden, and it was a benefit concert for, I think he was doing medical vans for children, something like that, mobile hospitals. And at the very end, Paul Simon came on stage, and they were both playing my guitars side by side. And that was the absolute moment where I just said, I made it.
Yeah. I mean, there must... I mean, I know those moments as a player for me, where you and I both and a lot of people in our business end up working with a lot of celebrities and develop relationships with them. And in the moment when I'm playing with people or producing or conducting or, whatever the situation is, it's about the work. But when you step back for a moment, it's always kind of this wonderful, mind-boggling moment of how amazing it is that you are actually working with these people who you have such deep respect for.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. It's a validation of all the effort you put into what you do.
You mentioned that you haven't really been able to essentially make a complete career out of being an acoustic guitar builder, even though certainly your repair work and you started building acoustic guitars. That's where you got your training, which I want to talk about now. But in a way that maybe that's been a little bit of a mixed blessing, because you are known for your electric instruments, your basses and your guitars, right. But you understand the importance of the acoustic quality of the instrument before it gets into the electronics. Your instruments, before they're plugged in, have a sound. They resonate. You make sure that the wood and the lacquer and everything comes to your standards.
About 1982, I had already formulated my I think underlying philosophy that electric instruments are first and foremost acoustic instruments. Right. And because I was doing a lot of modification work and a lot of upgrading of instruments that all the session guys in New York had. And some instruments would respond to what I was doing to them much more than others. And when I started to take a look at what was going on there, I felt that it was, number one, the lighter weight guitars and basses were the ones that responded the best to my upgrades. And then I came to the conclusion that the better they sounded acoustically, unamplified, the better they would always sound amplified. And I remember advising people if they were going to go out to Manny's or Sam Ash to buy an instrument, compare 2 or 3 of the same model, and whichever one has the best acoustic sound, that's the one you should buy. Mm-hmm. And that's still my foundation. I mean, I have on my woodstock, the wood is my foundation, and I've been building like that for my entire life. My first batch of 20 guitars in 1981, 82 were all chambered solid bodies, So I was doing it from the beginning.
And are most of your basses chambered as well?
They are.
Okay.
I started chambering about 20 years ago.
Right.
I was having trouble getting my body wood as light as I wanted. And at that time, you didn't have mills that would separate the heavier swamp ash from the lighter swamp ash. Same with the alder. And so the only way I could address the weight issue was to start hollowing them out in the middle and putting mm-hmm. a top on them. So, I've been chambering consistently now for a good 20 years.
Can you tell me basically what psychobiology is? Because I know you were working on your PhD when your passion for sure. guitar and took over, and then I want to talk about the transition between that to 1972 when you started apprenticing.
Okay, well, psychobiology is basically the study of animal behavior, and it can range from the Jane Goodall chimpanzee side of things, or I was studying the hormones that induce maternal behavior in mammals. Mm-hmm. And so, again, it could be neurochemistry and behavior, it could be hormones and behavior, what the whole nature nurture conversation, is this instinctive behavior, is it learned behavior? That's the gamut that it runs. And again, I was particularly studying the hormones that induce maternal behavior in mammals.
And was your goal, did you want to go off to Africa and study animals, or did you want to teach, or?
Well, yeah, the goal at that time was the typical goal was you got an academic teaching position and you got a research grant. Mm-hmm. And so this was 1972. Nixon was president, and he was cutting all the funding to the sciences at that time. So the thought of just being an assistant professor making $35,000 a year for the rest of my life didn't look so appealing anymore. And by that time, the guitar obsession had overtaken my being so much that, my mother kept saying, well, get your PhD first, then build guitars. But I couldn't do it. I had to get out.
In hindsight, do you think she was right? I don't.
No,
but,
not at all. I haven't regretted that decision for 1 second in 50 years.
Good. So you basically, you ended up doing an apprenticeship with, was it Augie Le Prince?
Augie Le Prince. It wasn't really an apprenticeship.
You just started working with him.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I quit I had spent a year writing to guitar makers all over the world, and I couldn't find anyone who would take me on.
And by the way, when you say writing, let's take everybody back for a minute. Paper and pencil,
handwritten letter.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that was very instrumental for me was the last whole Earth catalog. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. So this is what, again, was around 1971. Mm-hmm. And they had about 3 pages on instrument making, which included literally the only book written on the subject by a guy named Irving Sloan called Classical Guitar Making. And the only place to buy wood to make musical instruments. So that was like a Rosetta Stone in itself. Right. There's 3 pages in the whole Earth catalog. And, but anyway, I quit graduate school. I went to work at the local music store selling guitars. And they were carrying these handmade acoustics by Augie Le Prince. And he was only an hour away by car, an hour and a half away. So one day his sales rep came in and I said to him, I don't want to be selling guitars. I want to be making them. Can you arrange for me to meet with Augie? And he hooked it up. I drove down there. And so it was Augie, his brother, and 2 guys in the workshop at that time. It was in Rosemont, New Jersey, working in a converted chicken coop. and ironically, the next chicken coop over was where they were making the Mutron pedals back in the day, the original Mutron pedals. Mm-hmm. So it was just paradise for me. I mean, I was living in the country and making enough money to survive, and building guitars every day. I mean, and playing guitar after work all the time. I mean, they were the most memorable, wonderful years of my life.
And were you already pretty handy with tools, with woodworking?
Well, I wasn't with woodwork. I mean, I took woodworking shop in high school, but
we all did. But we learned how to make, like, on a lathe, or I made a skateboard and a pencil holder.
I made what they called a pump lamp. You know, it had a lever with the lamp on and off, and a tie rack. But no, what I told Augie when I first met him, and again, he wasn't an educated man. He was a barber who taught himself how to make guitars and was building guitars in the back of his barber shop originally. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, literally, this is what I said. I said, if I can implant an electrode in the lateral hypothalamus of a rat's brain, I think I can build a guitar.
That makes sense. I mean, because I was curious about, how did, a psychobiology background prepare you to become the master luthier that you are? But you just kind of nailed it.
Yeah. So I knew I had a good high eye-hand coordination. I mean, that's how it got started. And I learned how to sharpen chisels, and I learned how to sand, and I learned how to do everything I needed to do. And the shop was small enough that I pretty much got to do every process that goes into making an acoustic guitar.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I had heard in a previous interview that you had done that you still have one of the first instruments or the first guitar that you built, but other than that, you don't save your instruments. You build them and put them out in the world.
It's the saving part is, I mean, you got to pay the rent.
That's right.
And I was never in the situation where I didn't have to pay rent. I didn't have to pay bills. I didn't have to buy wood. I didn't have to buy pickups. I've been on this cash flow roller coaster for 40 years. And anybody who's got a small business is pretty much going to be in the same boat.
Right. But so far, so good.
Yeah.
By the way, for those who are watching, you are in your showroom in New York right now.
Yeah.
So there's some beautiful instruments hanging on the wall behind you, guitars and basses, solid body guitars, hollow body jazz guitars, which makes perfect sense because let's not jump ahead, but we'll talk about Jim Hall. But let's talk about Marcus Miller and how that introduction to Marcus and then to our friend Will Lee kind of opened up this whole career for you.
So let's back up a little bit from that.
Okay.
So I was running the repair department at a store outside of Philly, in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. And I had a customer down there named Craig Snyder, who was a session guy in Philly. And so in 1977, he moved to New York City and got into the session scene in New York City. And every time he would come back to Philly to visit his parents, he would bring me a guitar or two to work on. And I remember saying to him, why are you bringing these to me? There's got to be better people in New York you can bring these to. And he said, no, Roger, there aren't. And so then he started bringing instruments of some of his friends down to me. And then he would come back the next week or two and pick them up. And then I started a 6-month process of driving to New York every Saturday morning. I'd work out of his apartment. Guys would come over. I would do setups while they waited. And again, they would leave me the bigger work and I'd bring it back to Philly on Sunday and worked on it during the week and then bring it back the following weekend. And I literally did that every weekend for 6 months till I felt confident that I had connected with enough of the city guys to do it. Mm-hmm. And I had split up with my first wife. We had sold our house. I had $11,000 to my name, and that I took a loft on 33rd and Madison, not exactly Music Row. And I put a wall up in the middle and I lived on one side. I worked on the other. I didn't even have a real stove or a real bathroom. There was a closet with a toilet in it and another closet with a cheap stall shower in it. Mm-hmm. And a sink for both the bathroom and the kitchen. It was as primitive as you could get. And I was in that space for 7 years. And so Craig Snyder was the one who brought all these guys to the shop and introduced them to me. And so one day he brings Marcus in, and I'm guessing it was either late 79 or early 80, because I really opened in October of 79. And Marcus came in. He was just getting started doing jingle sessions and that kind of stuff. And he had a 77 jazz bass, and he just totally trusted me. And he said, make this the best bass you possibly could make it. So I had just started experimenting with active tone circuits a few months previous to that.
Building them or modifying other people's?
I'm sorry?
Were you designing these active circuits, or were you?
No, I became pals with a group of guys who had a store in San Francisco called Stars Guitars, and they were offshoots from Alembic.
Right.
And so they started making active circuits and upgraded hardware. And I had met one of the principals, Ron Armstrong, 2 years in a row in the late 70s. We were attending service seminars at Gibson to be trained to be authorized repair guys for Gibson. Mm-hmm. So we hit it off. We became friends. He became my electronics mentor.
Got it.
And so they were selling these circuits for me to install. And so I did the first one for a New York guy named Tony Kniff, and it was on his P-Bass. And his immediate reaction after his first gig was, "This was amazing. I cut through through the PA better than I ever had." And shortly after that, Marcus came in. So I told him what I was going to do, and I was going to install the preamp. I was going to pull the frets, reach through the fingerboard, refret his neck, make a new nut, put on a heavier bridge, shield the electronics. Nobody was doing electronic shielding work at that time. I was the only guy in New York doing that. And I hate to sound cliche, but the rest was history. I mean,
well, that is what they say. The Sadowsky sound was born.
Right. And Marcus gave me credit for giving him his sound. Mm-hmm. And Will was next. Willie was next. And then Neil Jason and, all the top session bass players. And that was part of what led me into more bass-oriented work, because active electronics didn't resonate for guitar players the way it did for bass players.
Right.
And all the guitar player needed was a good amp and a pedal or two, and he was set. But bass players always had trouble sitting in the mix to where you could hear them, and both recorded and live. And for whatever reason, the frequencies of this original Stars Guitars preamp just really, really worked perfectly. And so in my enlightened verbiage, I rode the horse in the direction the horse was going. And
instead of resisting it.
Yeah,
you're trying, exactly. Like you, as you spoke about earlier, because you were already getting a sense of that. You can't really control life, so you were practicing that at that point.
Yeah, and I knew by that point there was no market for a handmade acoustic guitar at that time.
Right.
Everybody was playing Martins, Gibsons, or Guilds.
Right.
The only smaller acoustic makers at that time was Gurion Guitars.
Oh, right, I remember them.
Boston Guitars. And Gallagher down in Tennessee.
Or was it Jim Olsen, for James Taylor's guitar builder?
Yeah, but he came way later.
Way later, and those were expensive, as many of them were. I mean, that was that. Well,
they were when he started. I could have bought an Olsen for $1,800 back in the day when he was just starting out.
Right.
We were having guitar maker conventions every 2 years on the East Coast. And I met Jim again when his guitars were $1,600, $1,800. And I remember him telling me, "I'm going to give it one more year. And if nothing happens, I'm packing it in." And that was the year that James Taylor got one. Mm-hmm. So.
Right. And just for perspective for our listeners, what does a handmade guitar go for these days of yours or theirs?
Well, I mean, are you talking my electric instruments or their acoustic instruments? Or
why not both? So people can know, because I'd love for people to know that they can own your instruments, and there's various levels of that as well.
I think today a good handmade acoustic builder is getting foot in the door, $6,000 to $8,000. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about the smaller production companies like Bourgeois Guitars or Froggy Bottom Guitars. They're already set up for production, so you're probably looking $4,000 and up, for
right.
But my instruments now basically are starting at about $5,000.
Right. For
electric
instruments.
Excessively higher than that, because I'm not big into decorative work like inlay work or more artistic stuff that doesn't make the guitar play or sound better.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been focused on making instruments for working musicians and not for collectors. So the collector market is a big market, and there are plenty of guys paying 25, 15, 25, $35,000 for custom-made instruments. And my friend John Monteleone, who I worship, I mean, his foot in the door, if he even is taking a new order, would be about $150,000. And he's got 4 of them in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. He's remarkable, but I'm not building for collectors.
Although it doesn't mean that your instruments are not aesthetically beautiful.
Well, I feel I've always had a very good design sense, but I keep it simple. It simple. Again, I don't do a lot of inlay work. I don't do a lot of pearl. I don't do any wood carving. It's all about, look, there are 3 fundamentals to an instrument. It's got to sound good, it's got to feel good, and it's got to look good.
Right.
But I go for a fairly reserved, simple aesthetic.
And let me ask you, just for example, like our mutual friends Verdine White or Will Lee, who own more than one of your instruments. When they come back for a second, third, fifth, or sixth, or seventh instrument, is it redundant, or are they looking for a particular sound or something different?
Well, I think with Will, it's more that, I don't know if it's instrument fatigue or Will fatigue, but this starts to get tired with a particular bass at some point.
Sure.
But he's always been wonderful. I make him a new one and he gives me back the old one. And that's really the way. Again, I don't give away instruments to artists. I don't sell with artist discounts. That's the kind of relationship I like the best. You want something new, then give me back something old that you don't play anymore.
Right.
So I'm just completed 2 new basses for Will, 2 new 4-strings that I'll be delivering tomorrow after work. And he's going to give me the one that's not working for him anymore back.
Right. Yeah. By the way, we Will and I recorded right before COVID together on my new album that I'm finishing, and of course he flew out here with his Sadowsky, and it sounded amazing, absolutely amazing. Yeah, I just loved it.
My biggest compliment, honestly, is when the recording engineer or the front of house sound guy tells me that they don't have to touch a thing on the board. It's just plug and play, perfect.
I remember my first relationship, like artist relationship, with a high-end builder, and it was with Valley Arts Guitars with Mike McGuire, who I know you know. And Mike had said the same thing to me that you were just saying about Will. And he basically said, what we're going to do is we're going to loan you some instruments to try, and we want to make sure, and we're going to find out everything that you don't like about it. And then we're going to keep getting it closer to what you really love until you absolutely fall in love with it. And that's going to be the perfect instrument until you change your mind.
Well, when I started working for Will, he had a Fender jazz bass with a Valley Arts neck on it. That's what he was playing at the time. So there's a lot of throwing spaghetti against the wall with Will and other players and seeing what sticks.
Right.
And I cannot, to this day, I can't predict if someone's going to bond with one of my instruments or not. So for that reason, I don't do custom builds out of what my models are and the options that I offer. And that way I can sell everything on 7-day approval. And if you're not in love with my bass or guitar after 7 days, I want it back and I'll give you a refund. And it's that simple.
Yeah, that makes great sense.
I mean, I can't lie in bed at night thinking that there are people who feel they just spent $5,000 and they feel stuck with something they don't love. I can't write like that.
Right. So, but then you also have your Japanese line, the Metro line.
Right.
was the part of the purpose of that to make, well, they're solid, they're not chambered, from what I understand, but also does that bring the price down a little bit, or
That
are
was
they?
to have a more accessible line,
Yes.
as well as the fact that, when you're at my level, you can only make as much money as there are hours in the day to be at your workbench.
Right.
And so it was to try to generate some additional income that didn't involve me to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
So it came in, I started selling to a Japanese distributor in 1987. And then in 2000, so then in 92, they hired a Japanese bass maker, and he wanted to train with me. So they sent him over to work with me. He left his wife and 2 small kids to work with me for 10 months, and then went back to Japan to be my authorized technician under the roof of my distributor. And so then he started making some basses based on my designs. But I wasn't quite ready to give him everything. I didn't give him my preamp, or anything like that. And after a couple of years, when I was really comfortable with what he was making, I said, all right, let's do a Sadowsky production line in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing was the Metro line. And then, in which we basically reproduced every model I made in New York in the Metro. And you're right, they were not chambered, they were solid bodies. And then in around 17, we started a more factory-built guitar. This was kind of artisan-built. He had like a team of subcontractors making the bodies, spraying the, whatever, and he did all the fretwork and the final setup. And so that we finally got our foot in the door in a good Japanese factory. And then we came out with the Metro Express, which was quite reasonably priced. It was like $18.95 for 4-string and $19.95 for 5-string.
Great. And
those were chambered. And that went going until 19. And then I decided to switch my license to someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is my Japanese partners were only interested in the Japanese market, and I still had to handle all the sales and distributions and service outside of Japan.
Right.
And again, I want to be at my workbench.
Right, you want to make guitars and basses.
So I spent a couple years really thinking who I could partner with at this level. I wanted someone who had a great factory. I wanted someone who had international distribution and someone who had a great reputation. And I woke up January of 2019, and I just had this epiphany that the only guy I can think of who could do what I wanted was Warwick in Germany. Warwick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sent a letter to Hans-Peter Wilfer, the head of Warwick, an email, feel him out if he'd be interested in talking about this. And he responded the next day. I'm so excited, I can't sleep. And we met 2 weeks later at NAMM and had our first sit down. And so I've transferred my license over to him. The Metro line is made in Germany in his factory, and the Metro Express is made in China. And, I just want that instrument for the money, which is $8.99 for a 4-string and $9.99 for a 5-string. And it still has my preamp and my pickup designs and my approach to wood choices. And I just want that to be the best bass for the money.
That's fantastic.
I'm not an elitist. I'm not a snob. And I get that people only have X amount of money that they can spend on an instrument.
Right. Not everybody has $5,000 or up to buy an instrument.
So we have 3 price tiers. The Metro Express is on just under $1,000. The Metro lines are about $3,500.
Mm-hmm.
And plus they have their own custom shop where they can do higher end Sadowsky instruments there as well. They do limited editions every year of something special. And it's worked out really, really well. The problem was getting all this going during COVID, because I couldn't travel to Germany. I couldn't travel to China. So it was like daily FaceTiming with the production manager in Germany to get all everything where I wanted it to be. And right now, I'm very pleased with where it is.
And that's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that story.
Of course.
Speaking of stories, okay, let's get into a few. Prince. Tell me about you working with Prince, because I know there's a good story there.
So this was 1984, and I got contacted by his guitar tech, and the initial issue was that Prince has always played this Hohner guitar called the Mad Cat, and it looks like a Telecaster. Mm-hmm. And it was really his favorite guitar his entire life. And he couldn't buy any; they weren't available on the market anymore. And so the first job was for me to make 2 clones of the Hohner Mad Cat. And so I did that. I had a good friend who I knew from my Philly days and was doing repair work at a music store in Kansas somewhere. I forget what town, Kansas City. And I said, come on out for a couple of weeks and help me make these, because I was really under a lot of time pressure.
Right.
And he came out. His name is Jay Black, and he later became a master builder at the Fender Custom Shop. So he came out and we knocked these guitars out in a couple of weeks. And then they wanted to fly me to Minneapolis, first class, with seats for the guitar, really over the top, silly extravagance. And so I would deliver them. And then I remember sitting down with a guitar tech. His name is Paul Cheveria. I think he's still in the biz. And the first thing was Prince wanted to know if I would not put my name on the headstock. And I refused. I was ready to walk away.
Good for you.
I refused on that. So we got through that hurdle. Oh, and then I vividly remember I'm in the hockey arena or the concert arena in Minneapolis, and Prince, I needed to ask Prince a few questions about the next project. Mm-hmm. So he was standing about 15 feet away from me with a large bodyguard kind of dude next to him. And he would whisper his question to the other gentleman, and he would walk halfway to me and tell me what Prince said. And I just look, I understand everybody wants a piece of him, blah, blah, blah.
Right. But you asked me here.
I don't want anything from you. I want to make you a guitar.
Yeah, I want you to be happy. Right.
Exactly. So that was kind of off-putting. And so I raised my price significantly on the next instrument. But at the very end of Purple Rain of the movie, there's this scene where he's in concert. He leaps up onto some super high speakers, and he's sitting on the top of the highest one, and he grabs this Fender-looking guitar, and you only see the back of the instrument, and he's stroking the back of the neck like this, and then it ejaculates into the audience out of the tip of the headstock. And that was a total prop guitar, and it was connected with a hose to a gallon of ivory liquid on stage.
Did you design that? Were you part of that?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
But the next job was he wanted 2 guitars that looked like his Hohner Madcap that ejaculated. Okay, but was still a functional guitar. Okay, so that was the next project. So what Jay and I did is we ran brass tubing inside the neck alongside the truss rod. It exited at the tip of the headstock. And then there was a compartment in the back of the body that tube went into where they could connect their valve for triggering the ejaculate. And then there was a hole in the side for an air hose to connect to the compressed, you know, and that was...
That's a great story.
That was 3 and 4. And then 5 and 6 were, he wanted purple guitars with flowers on them.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get someone to sketch the artwork and then find an airbrush artist to do it. And so those were the last 2 guitars. And I do have some photos of him playing the very last one of those purple guitars. And that's really all I have, you know.
Right.
I mean, I took photos of all the instruments before I delivered them.
Sure, of
and
course.
Again, every guitar, first class to Minneapolis, a seat for the guitar. It was just a lot of excess at that time.
Each time. So it was more than one trip there. Right.
It was like 4 or 5 trips. Yeah.
Did he eventually become more accessible to you, or no? Okay. Which is kind of the antithesis of the way you're used to dealing with most artists.
Exactly, and
including some really big name artists as well.
Right.
So.
But it cemented something I already knew previously in my gut, that I've never been, I'm going to use the word, I've never been a star fucker.
Yeah.
And to me, their celebrity was great for my branding, my reputation, but it had nothing to do with my relationship with them as people I was making instruments for. And most of the time I didn't deal with them. I dealt with their guitar techs. I dealt with their production manager. So, but I was never the kind of guy that hung out backstage with one of my guitars to grab them after a show and show them my guitar. Yeah. I never did any of that stuff.
Right.
And so everybody came to me by word of mouth, or their crew knew of me, their techs knew of me. And that's the way I've always operated, you know.
I applaud you for the very fact that you would have walked from the deal also before taking your name off of the headstock, because of all the obvious reasons, not just the promotion, but that there's an integrity level there as well.
It's insulting, is what it is. You know, it's like you doing a whole production for someone and not getting credit on the record even, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, I know, like even for example, the Rolling Stones, like, you know, they've have multiple instruments that you've built as well, and some of that you're dealing with techs too, like our friend Norick Renson, who's a repair guy here that you know, of course.
Yeah, I know Norick.
You know, Norick used to tell me, for example, some of his clients like Kenny Loggins, he would just tell Norick to go buy him some guitars. You know, like Kenny wasn't that involved.
Right.
You know, he would say, I want a such and such, go pick it out. And so I can see, I mean, sometimes they're busy or they just don't want to do it, and they trust their person. So that's slightly different, because
it's slightly different. Yeah.
Because I mean, they're still accessible at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I only made 2 guitars for Keith Richards, mm-hmm. and they were both my electric nylon guitars. And back you may remember, back in the 80s, a lot of the session guys were playing the Chet Atkins nylon guitar.
Right.
And they were always bringing them to me with complaints: they're too heavy, they don't intonate right, the pickup they didn't like. So I was modifying them all through the 80s.
Right.
And then I realized one day I thought I could build a guitar that they would like better for that.
So you did.
I prototyped an electric nylon guitar, and at that time I still did a lot of repair work. So Pierre de Beauport, who was the roadie for the Rolling Stones and later became their production manager, he would run like 30 instruments through the shop for the whole band before going out on the road on a tour. So we were in the process of doing that. he came in and he asked me my opinion that Keith was looking for a nylon guitar that wouldn't feed back at a stadium concert. And I had just finished my first one. And I said, here it is, Pierre, you know, and why don't you take it and let Keith take it for a spin and let me know what you think. And Keith loved it. He had me build him a number 2, a backup. Mm-hmm. He nicknamed the guitar Electric Guts, and you know, gut strings. And it's featured in that big book that you can buy in the museum shops of the Rolling Stones guitars. And the one time I got to be with him at a rehearsal at a studio, he was just a regular guy, and he couldn't have been nicer. You know, and
that's what I've heard. That and how wonderful for you, you know, to have those experiences as well.
Yeah.
Which are most of your experiences that you have, partially by choice, you know, because again, you know, that's the intention in which you've had this career.
Right. So,
you know, I know there's a couple live people with us, so if you don't mind, Lisa, if you or anybody in our audience has a quick comment or question and would like to get involved. Absolutely.
If anybody has a question, please hit the little circle in the lower left corner. It's a little black circle with the lines, and it'll give you an option to request to be on stage, and you can type your question right in there, and I will come and get it. While you're doing that, I want to talk to Roger.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. So I feel like I've been following you around the country. I'm a Jersey girl.
Okay.
I used to live in Brooklyn. I have family in Ardmore.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So I knew that was because who knows Ardmore unless you know Ardmore.
I had a house in Ardmore.
You were Bryn Mawr. You were like around the corner.
That's right.
Hanging out in Bryn Mawr.
But that's where I bought a house back in '74. Was in Ardmore.
Awesome. Yeah, they're still there. If my brain comes all the way on, I'll tell you the street they're on. But I was, of course, going in for your PhD and then leaving to go do anything else but that. I'm sure as my parents' eyebrows went up, yours did too, because I left like normal work to go into the arts. And my dad for years was waiting for me to, when is she going to get a real job?
Exactly. Same thing for me.
Right. And then I want to give you something, but I want to ask you this question first.
Sure.
What was the thing that just made you go, this is it? I know I'm getting ready to leave this. I know people are going to think I've lost my mind. What was it in you that said, I'll withstand all of the criticism and everything that goes with this because I know this is the path I'm supposed to be on?
Wow, that's a very good question, Lisa. And
I get one a week.
You're not limited to one, Lisa, but they're always beautiful questions.
You know, I don't know if there was a specific incident. As I was mentioning to Terry in the beginning, those first 2 years working for Augie, you know, I was a long-haired hippie, holding my ponytail back with a capo and hanging out with great musicians. And my whole life for that like year and a half was just one magical trip I was on. And between making the guitars, the playing guitars, I was ecstatic. I mean, I didn't have a pot to piss in money-wise, but it was the happiest I'd ever been in my life, you know?
And I asked you that because I think so many people have an experience like that, and they think it's a fluke. Like they don't believe that kind of life exists for them.
Right.
And so they have it, and then they go, but I came back to my senses. No, you actually lost your mind when you left that.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I always had intention, and I made things happen for myself.
I love that you said what you said to Terry when he asked you, how did you know you could do it? And you spoke, well, if I can do this, then I could. Transferable skill.
Right, sure.
I mean, that's like the perfect example of a transferable skill that no one would have made the connection. And then you talked about loving Greek philosophers. Mm-hmm. I was like, who is this man? Who is this man? So I want want to get you something, it's optimize.me.
Okay.
Optimize.me instead of .com. Just go to the site. They just opened up all of their stuff for free. It's a combination of Greek philosophy. They call it where ancient wisdom meets positive psychology.
All right.
So you can get things called philosopher's notes. This guy's already read the books of the greats, and he synthesizes it into these 10 to 20-minute audio videos that you can listen or watch. And you can do, we call them plus ones. They're anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. And it's just positivity to help people live their optimal lives. You are already doing it.
Well, thank you.
So this is you'll be like a master in a master class.
Well, and I'm going to give you one back, and it's called The Daily Stoic. The Daily Stoic. There's a Facebook page. There's a website. There are books. And the book, The Daily Stoic, has 365 paragraphs of writings from Marcus Aurelius and all these Greek guys. And the idea is you read one a day. And because the concept is, it's not you read it once and you get it. It's a daily practice, stuff.
Right.
And you got to read it over and over again. The next time you start experiencing road rage, you got to connect it with what you read the other day in the book. You know, it's ongoing. It's just ongoing.
Well, you're definitely going to love this because I think he's one of the authors that gets featured on Optimize.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that.
I see that we have, thank you, Lisa. I see we have Will on the stage. Will, if you want to jump in before I get to my closing questions.
Yeah, I had invited him once. Will, I just invited you to the stage again. So if you see that thing pop up, if you hit it, we can get you on stage. Let's see here.
In the meantime, I'm going to ask you one other question, Roger, before we get to our closing questions, which is what lessons, well, actually, really the question is, what's changed about your perspective in life as you've gotten older?
Oh,
or changed or remain the same?
Yeah, I don't think much has changed in that regard. I mean, I feel the exact same way I did 40 years ago with what I do and how I relate to people. And
I get that. I kind of do as well. I get that.
Yeah. So for me, it's just been one long, wonderful ride. I mean, there again, small businessman, it's a roller coaster, you know, and 1 month you can pay the bills, you can meet payroll, and the next month you're scrambling.
Right.
And I've just learned not to freak out about the low points because it always turns around.
Right.
I haven't ever, fortunately, I've never been in a situation where I had to borrow money or anything like that. But I've come very close. You know, I had a line of credit and I got into debt and I paid it off and got in debt to the bank, you know, with a line of credit. So, yeah, that's just part of being a small businessman. But fortunately, it's always turned the corner for me, even when things were tight.
Man, I'm so glad that you've stayed your course. I think it's beautiful that you've done that and been able to do it, but also willing to do it. Like you have faith and passion, and that just guides your journey.
Well, you know, the other part of it is, what the hell else am I going to do?
Exactly. Right.
God. So Roger, your guy Ryan Holiday, who's the author of The Daily Stoic, has another book called The Obstacle is the Way.
I know, I have it. And
you've been living it. And
yeah.
Like, I'm not scared of that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You know, and again, I don't.
My guitar.
You know, one of the things back in the 70s when I was doing all these, you know, growth, you know, programs, is you don't grow from being comfortable. You grow from being uncomfortable, you know, and it's not about being comfortable. There's no growth there.
No, so that's the easy way out.
Yeah, you need to push. You need to push yourself.
You know, in high school, your friends would write, "Oh, I hope you never change" in your yearbook.
Right.
My mom saw someone wrote that in my yearbook, and she was like, "Oh my God, that's horrible."
Right.
Yeah.
She said, "I hope you never change." And I'm like, I'm 17. I don't think they knew that.
Right. Yeah.
So Will is here. Will, if you go down to the bottom of your phone, you'll see that little monkey head. If you hit that, it will turn your microphone on, and you can talk to Roger and Terry.
Hi, Will. Thanks for joining our conversation.
I will.
Yeah, I'm really new to Fireside. This is only like the second room I've probably been in. I'm really glad that I've heard it. It's really very interesting. I've been a full-time musician for like 30 years, and I heard Minneapolis mentioned. That's the area that I'm in. So I kind of like the whole topic of quotes too. I guess I'll throw mine into the ring.
Perfect.
It's ahaquotes.com. You might check that out.
Okay.
ahaquotes.com. But I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot to add. I guess I find, say me being kind of a typical full-time musician, I perform for children and families, but I basically play junk guitars. All my friends with day jobs have great guitars. A good example was my brother had bought a guitar for my niece, and like the second day she had it, she dropped it and broke the head off of it. And
I can fix that.
Right. Roger can.
Well, my brother just bolted it together, and it's like, well, I'm not going to throw away a perfectly good guitar. And I played that thing for like a couple of years, just the way it was, and it was okay. But finally, I said, okay, I got to get an actual like decent guitar. So anyway, I appreciate what you're doing. It sounds really fun. I'd like to see more of your work, Roger.
Well, thank you. You can check out my website. It's Sadowsky.com, and I'm on Facebook. So. And again, there's nothing wrong with the guitars you have. If they work for you and they don't hurt your fingers to play, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And they bring joy to you and to other people. Right.
Everybody needs a junker they can take to the beach or not worry about getting damaged. So, go with it.
But yeah, as a matter of fact, Lisa will put up Roger's, there it is. It's www.sadowsky.com. So
I see it. There's an I after Sadowsky there. That shouldn't be there. So
thanks for fixing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Did I put an I in there? Wait a minute. Oh, I sure did.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's a Y.
The Milwaukee, too many of my friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll fix that right now.
That's okay.
I'm going to fix it right now.
Will, thanks for just jumping on and making your comment. We appreciate you doing that, and welcome to the format. It's part of the beauty of this format.
Back in the day when I used to get more mail, I got a lot of envelopes addressed to Sadowsky guitars.
Oh. So, Roger, I want to get to my closing questions, and then I'll open it up for you for any closing thoughts. The first of the three questions I ask all of my guests is, since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally? And it's kind of interesting to ask you because you make things for a living as well. So it even has a three-way meaning. But what does making it mean to you in your life?
Well, again, making it, as I recounted earlier, that concert where Paul Simon and Bruce Springsteen were both playing my guitars, that was a definite make it experience for me. I think being able to support a family and put my son through school and that's another real making it. I was married for 10 years before my wife and I decided to have a kid because I didn't feel like I made enough money to support a family. And so that was an important thing for me to be able to achieve, was being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think the other part of it is the almost daily emails that I get from people just telling me on a regular basis just how much my instrument has affected them in a positive way, both either in terms of professionally or just as their best friend. You know, people have very intimate relationships with their guitars. You know, I was like that.
I still am. Yeah, of course.
You know, and it's something you turn to for joy and for solace when you're feeling blue, and you know, again, it's just knowing pretty much on an almost daily basis, especially when I look at social media, just how much of an impact I've had on people in a positive way. And I'm very humbled by all of that. I really am.
You used the word joy, and that's a big part of, you know, you are a big proponent and participant in the creation of joy through the instruments that you build, and not only bringing joy to the those of us who get to play your instruments, but the people that get to receive the music that is created on your instruments. It's, you know, we're in the joy business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Music is, so I'm just an enabler for you guys to create joy as well.
In the best of ways.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate that.
Good.
Can you, this whole conversation has been about what I'm about to ask you, but can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Well, again, I think one of them is to get that the most important thing you have is your word. I think that without that, there is no success. Okay. You have a jingle date, you got to be there at 9 o'clock. You better be there at 5 to 9. And so the other thing I think is knowing that it's okay to not know. I think that's really, really important. When I was younger, I was like, I knew a little bit about a lot of stuff, and I used that to impress a lot of people, but it was real superficial stuff. And to learn that it was okay to not know, that was really important to me. And I think the final thing is listening. I mean, a lot of my success has just been my ability to listen to my clients, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and figuring out what I can do to address that for them. I never impose my opinions on people as far as how they should play or what they should play or what pickups they should use, or, you know, my job is to listen and get what you're looking for and do my best to meet that. So.
Thank you. Yeah, very clear, crystal clear. My closing question is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Very good question, Terry. I mean, you're it's like the Daily Double, you know?
Thanks, Roger. I want to keep it interesting, you know, for you, for me, and for our listeners.
Yeah. Well, my younger self, how young? I mean, when I'm
talking
5,
about, way back.
I think what I would have told myself was to stick with mastering an instrument better. And I never did the work. Mm-hmm. And I regret wasting all those years. I also, you know, I come from the point of view that when it comes to music, there's a lot of pre-wiring involved that you were born with.
Right.
And then I don't feel I ever had that. Everything I learned on any instrument was memorization and repeating, and I never got to a plateau where it just kind of flowed, like where I could just jam with other people. And, you know, I regret that immensely because I never got there, but I have to think it's just kind of how I'm wired. And, you know, I've accepted it.
Yeah, I've a few, you know, one of my friends has reminded me on occasion, he goes, stay in your lane.
Right.
You know, I mean, funny stories go along with that, but essentially, but it's like, embrace who you are,
Right.
and don't be afraid to say I don't know, like you said, but also don't be afraid to say that's not where I really shine. Like if
Right.
you want a heavy metal guy, I can play it,
Right.
but let me give you somebody who's really going to nail that.
Yeah. I also have a memory that while I was in graduate school, I had done a few like coffee house / bar gigs with my friend, duo. And I got really clear that I wasn't willing to make my self-esteem dependent on a bunch of drunk people or not listening to me. It just wasn't a pleasant feeling for me. So I said, yeah, I don't think I want to go down this road.
There's
a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right, Lisa?
Yeah, that's my volleyball coach once asked me because I thought I wanted to be a cheerleader, and I was like, I got to come to practice 15 minutes late because I want to go to cheerleading practice. She said, okay, so just make a decision. Do you want to You want to cheer for other people, or do you want to be cheered for?
Wow. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I was like, why does people keep? I'm like 16. Why do I have to think this deeply?
Right. I'm just a kid. Right. Give me another 10 years on that. I'll find it myself.
I'll get back to you on that one.
Roger, before we say goodbye to our audience and to each other, is there anything else, closing words, on anything on your heart or your mind that you want to share, talk about?
I just have to say what a pleasure it was to connect with you and to
Likewise.
do this. I mean, I feel wonderful right now. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, I thank Chaz Fricktel and Will Lee for introducing us and bringing us together.
Chaz is such a wonderful guy. I
he's
love
awesome.
Chaz. And we go back a long way. And I love the guy. And again, Will, I love Will, but Will has always challenged me to.
But he'll be the first to say it. Will has told me too when he talks about you. He goes, "Boy, I really put Roger through it."
Yeah. But I was up for it, you see, and I didn't run away from it. And like I said, it was throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall to see what's up. But
now there's a Will Lee model Sadowsky bass.
Yep. And I love Will. I really love him.
I do too. Yeah, he's a great guy. Roger, this has been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to meeting you in person when I get out to New York again, whenever and however that is. And thank you.
Thank you, Terry. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Lisa.
Dr. Lisa, thanks for joining us again.
Pleasure. This was a pleasure.
Oh, good.
All right.
To all of our virtual audience who has joined us live, we thank you. And to everybody who's listening to the archives, we thank you as well for spending your time with us. And everybody go to Sadowsky.com and
with a
check
Y.
it. With a Y, SADOWSKY.com.
Y is in Yankee.
Yeah, of course. And go check out these beautiful instruments, which, by the way, you can own, or you can call the store and have a conversation with Roger if you're interested in learning more. And I just encourage all of you to stay safe and everybody stay inspired. And thanks for joining Roger and Lisa and I. We really appreciate you. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Terry.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.